Hey everybody, this is Jennifer Posada and I have such a special and really important video for you today about spirituality and suffering. I've noticed over my lifetime, and especially over my dozen or so years of teaching, how many misconceptions there are about this subject. How many people believe that if you're suffering, it's a sign that you're not as evolved. And if you were more enlightened, you would never have any trace of suffering. And so I'm excited to tell you all about it. And part of the reason why is because I am a super interesting case. Oh yeah, let me tell you why. So I am highly psychic. I came into this life remembering my soul journey, why I was here, past lives, and more importantly, remembering that our origins and what we're made up of, which is love. And I have had access to all the information in the universe as was meant to be shared in the right way since I was a little girl, since my smallest years. I've also been capable of spontaneous healing and moving of amazing life force and entry into ecstatic states. And it goes on and on. And I have a very profound illness that has been a big part of my life in these past years. I have Lyme disease. So a good way to sort of look at this juxtaposition or describe it a little better would be to tell you a quote that I heard recently in a documentary. A man named Dr. Leo Galland said, "It's like if you were Superman and you met kryptonite. That's Lyme disease." So, Superman, kryptonite, Lyme disease. Superwoman, superperson, you pick, but I'm here to say that meeting your kryptonite does not have to be a bad thing. Although it may feel bad at times, it can be the most amazing thing that could ever happen to you. So, some of the questions that might come up in someone's mind when they look at someone like me and hear my stories is, well, if I was more enlightened, like I was saying, wouldn't I be all healed? Pain-free and able to heal myself instantly rather than over time and through a process? And if I were more quote-unquote psychic, wouldn't I have seen this coming? Wouldn't I have known that I'd had this disease my whole life instead of spending years searching for that truth? And wouldn't I know exactly what to do to heal myself? And actually, I do know exactly what to do to heal myself, so that's kind of cool. But I'd like to explain to you why these things can coexist, why I can have a profound state of consciousness and abilities that are equally profound, and also, healing abilities, psychic abilities, and also why this needs to be just the way it is in my life as a way to help mirror to you why any times of struggle in your own life may also have not only a treasured space ultimately, but more gifts than may now seem obvious. So I'd like to begin with talking about the fact that pain can be medicine. And it can actually be a sign of great illumination. Now, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean pain is the only sign of illumination and that you have to suffer to be more illuminated or to know your illuminated essence more. No, it doesn't. It's not the only way at all, thank goodness, but it is one way that most of us, if not all of us, at some point have explored. It's just that if we have some sense that it was, because we weren't evolved enough, then it can create a sense of less esteem or honor for what this medicine can really be about. And if you're at a time where you don't really feel like thinking of this medicine of pain as this huge gift, don't worry, that's not a requirement. But if anything that I say here speaks to you, it could help to make a shift that would allow you to feel more honored in your journey. And it can even, this information, lead to massive breakthroughs and really revisioning your life, your past, your present, and even your future. Seeing it with new eyes. So another thing that's important in this discussion is that intuition can mean trusting in what you don't know as much as what you do. What I mean by that is the deeper function of intuition is ultimately being able to trust not having the answers at times, as much as you do getting clear answers or insight or guidance, which is also wonderful. But both states, the state of not knowing and being in deep trust, and the state of having clear, affirming guidance, are and can be valuable at different times. So, this is the point where I'm going to tell you like the short version of my story and about Lyme disease, but honestly, there's no way I can do justice to either telling you about Lyme disease or about my story with it in this video and still focus on the other things I want to talk about. So please know that this is like the Cliff Notes version, the shortest possible version that I can do. And please know that because Lyme disease is so misunderstood, I may even say something that turns out to be inaccurate when I'm talking about it, or later turns out to be inaccurate. Let's hope that research finally gets the attention that it deserves so that people can be even better informed. Please. So, Lyme disease is a bacterial infection. It's a spirochete. That's the type of bacteria that it is. And while most people think that you get it from ticks, which you absolutely can, very likely the way that I got it as a very small child, you can also get it from other insects. You can get it congenitally, and there is some growing information on other ways that you might be able to get it from other humans potentially. And while that can seem scary to some people, I am also going to be sharing information that helps people have a firmer grasp of how to have their immune system in such a strong state that it's simply easier to not contract a lot of these things that seem to be growing in the world, in terms of seem to be spreading. And so there's just so much to say. Lyme disease is something that people can have and not even know it and not be symptomatic. And it's also something that can cause a myriad of challenging symptoms, or that can be, for at least a period of time, absolutely crippling or even deadly. It is actually an infection that's not as well known or nearly as well funded as cancer or HIV, but is equally important and equally serious. And the only reason it's not as well known of is because basically of corruption, financial incentives for some of the people who are creating the guidelines for the treatment of Lyme. So that's a subject for a whole other video, more information about Lyme disease, but it's important, I think, to explain at least a tiny bit as I go into this. And then for me personally, I now that I can look back over my life, the signs were there from a very early age. This Lyme disease, as it's called, has been in my life for nearly the entirety of my life. And as I'll talk about in a little while, it's been there to give me gifts, even though it's also been very challenging at times. So even though I had signs or sort of episodes that would happen in my life with symptoms from even when I was a child, and then through at times during my teenage years, and right around when I was 20, after I went to, I had a bunch of mercury fillings removed without full proper precaution, because at that time it was even less known about than it is now, how to properly do that. Then I traveled to India and may have been exposed to certain microbes my body maybe couldn't handle. And a couple other things happened, and by the time I had gone through that series of things, I was 20, but I felt like I was 80 or 100, and not just 80 or 100, but 80 or 100 and unwell, because you can be very well at 80 or 100. And I remember during my job that I had at that age, I would walk around just feeling like, why do I feel this way? I mean, I would just be so almost debilitated, but still able to move and function. And then somehow over those next couple of years, I kind of bounced back a little bit. And then about 7 years ago, actually, I guess it's about 8 years ago now, my husband and I moved into a house that likely had mold, and it was kind of the final blow for my immune system. And then I started to really show symptoms, and it was much more noticeable. So of course, being me, I went to my guides and my guidance, and I said, okay, go ahead, I'm ready. Tell me what's going on here. Let's do this. I have the full ability to scan my body, see my organs, what's going on with them, any of that. Talk to my guides, like I said, go to what people call the Akashic Records. I like to call it the inner library, and ask, what's going on, get information. So I have all these resources. And what my guide said was that this was a journey I was meant to take step by step. And I wasn't meant to have the answers at that time, like I was referencing earlier. I was meant to feel my way along. So I'd still have my intuition serving me as I sought out information and options and worked with myself energetically. But I was meant to take this journey. I like to call it the blind oracle's path. And I'll be making a video about that as well. I talk about that a lot when I'm teaching. So I did take that journey. I did a lot of my own research and learned so much and met some interesting people, and really I wouldn't change it, although those 7 years were on and off really challenging. And then finally, just over a year ago, we went to a clinic where we could get extensive testing, and I just said to them, test me for this, 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 and this, and everything tick-borne. Just go ahead and test me. And I remember the doctor said afterward, gosh, I think you said you're intuitive, but you came in and just knew exactly what tests to ask me to order. And so you might think, well, were the tests even necessary? Well, yes and no. I mean, sometimes it is useful or interesting to have test results. It depends on your situation and what feels right at the time. So, one thing that really helped as well is that when I talked to my guides about this, in terms of why I was meant to experience certain levels of exhaustion or debilitation at times, at other times I would feel very vital and experience profound ecstasy, which is still very much the case for me. What was explained to me and what my own guidance showed me is that I had spent so many lifetimes on a mission. I was committed to this remembering and doing my part to help bring what I call the Great Remembering back to the earth after what I call the time of the Great Forgetting. And the Great Remembering is just starting now. It's been just starting very recently, just beginning. And only now am I sort of healing everything that I set aside while I was on that mission, because I couldn't always stop to rest or to grieve when I was continuing on the path. And now, in these years that it took for me to get to the point I'm at now and find out more of what was going on and undergo treatment, I was able to live out that exhaustion or pain that needed to be lived out and felt. It's because this lifetime I was safe enough in my experience and I could pause or fulfill that mission. I had done what I needed to do. I mean, I'll continue to share and teach, but that flame of remembering that I was holding on to, it already did its part in helping to light the larger fire of remembering. So of course I needed to process all of that. There was a time where I sat with a friend in a cafe many years ago, and she said, well, can't you just see what's wrong with yourself and just fix yourself? You're an oracle. Can't you just, like I was saying before, heal yourself? And I said, that's what's happening. That's what's happening here. I know what I'm meant to know. And of course, it was profoundly supportive for me to know why I was going through it as well. But that doesn't mean I was supposed to snap my fingers and make it go away. Then I wouldn't have received all the gifts that were meant to come of it. So I'm using notes right now, and I'm actually recording this video at a time where I have a symptom called brain fog, which can be caused by many things, not just Lyme. I'm also having a little bit of a symptom called air hunger, where you see me try to take these deep breaths, and some other symptoms. And I actually wanted to record this video when I was in the midst of it, even though I'm certainly not at my most challenged right now at all. I'm at my better time of day. But I mean before I go through this next phase of healing. I wanted to make this video while I'm still in the thick of it, so that it would be that much more powerful sharing from this place. So over these years, the 7 years that I was going through all of this, I would often talk about having been through a challenging illness when I was teaching my courses, by phone, live, or online. And as I would talk about that, I would first of all talk about my illness in the past tense. And one of the reasons for that was because I sometimes already felt like it was in the past tense. It didn't always feel present. And there's some magic to that, because we are only partially in the reality we think we are of the moment. And there is so much magic and so much of the miraculous happening all the time that it's as if right now I both am, quote unquote, sick or have this illness, and also am not and do not. And I'll say more about that in a moment. And also in my courses, I've always said, if you think that having this truly wonderful life is not possible, who's modeling that? Someone who has this amazing life that they really love and enjoy, even if they also have struggles. And that if anyone needed an example of that, I am an example of that, because I love my life. And that is true, despite any of this that I've been going through. My life is so beautiful and amazing. And this journey has been an incredible part of it. So, really briefly, in terms of what I have experienced, honestly, there are just no words for the different dimensions of pain that I've been to. And I call them the hell realms, but I don't think of them as bad, because they're there to show me things and help me access deeper healing gifts. And there is something unbelievable about having undergone this level of sort of death during life. And I had experienced many things like that before in my life through extreme sort of initiatory, almost kind of travel through trauma in my childhood and past. But this has definitely been unlike anything else, though it's challenging to compare. And physiologically, I've had not just pain, but a lot of debilitation. And at its worst, treatment for Lyme actually can make you, not for everyone, so I don't want to set this up in everybody's minds, but it can make you feel a lot worse. As you are doing anything that creates die-off of organisms like the Lyme bacteria or Candida or any other infection that might be in your body of that nature, the die-off is something that your body then has to process and move out, and also any bacteria or viruses that those organisms give off when they die, then your body has to deal with that. So essentially you have to detoxify and optimize your detoxification so profoundly that that can move out without causing you a great deal of suffering in excess. And it can still do that even if you've optimized your detoxification pathways as best you know how, or as best you know how with the support of your healing practitioner or practitioners like a doctor or naturopath. So I just don't even have the right space in this video to go into what it's been like having Lyme disease and what treatment has been like in this last year. But basically, I was diagnosed a little over a year ago. We also found out that I gave it to my husband when we had blood contact. We had scratches, and we thought it would be so cool to be blood brothers, about 13 years ago. And that's when his health started to decline, and it's a long story, but it's a journey we've both been on, which is very profound. So here's how I see my experience. My experience is that these spirochetes, the Lyme bacteria, which is only one of the infections that typically comes along with Lyme's, and I was saying Lyme. Some people say Lyme's with an S, but that's actually not what it's called. There's just so much to say. So some people see fighting any of these organisms as a fight, and that can be really helpful for some people. So I'm not at all against that for anyone else. But how I see it is not as a fight against spirochetes or any other organisms that might be infecting my body. I see them as friends that came to show me things, and who will leave when they are done giving me the gifts that they are bringing. And so I am not interested in some spontaneous forced healing right now, although if I felt like it were time, I would be. And so I think it's wonderful when people have spontaneous healings. In fact, I am so aware that when the time comes, because I can communicate with these organisms, they will know and step back, and it will be time. So I see myself as already healed while I go through this experience, and also healing at the same time. I both trust that I am healed, and I still lean into the healing at the same time. I find a lot of beauty when I teach and talk about specific, especially goddesses, who chose purposefully to experience suffering, or what we might term illness, in order to reach a deeper alchemy. So while Isis and Mary Magdalene are a couple of my favorite stories to talk about, I think I'll focus on Isis and Inanna, who is the other goddess I love to talk about in terms of this journey. So for many years, long before my Lyme symptoms started coming up, When I would teach in courses, the way that I would explain going through challenging times is as if it was a journey through the underworld. And something amazing about journeying the underworld is that once you have been down every corridor of everything that you're afraid of, and you've looked at all of it, the underworld is not a fearsome place anymore. It's a place of healing. It's a place that you know well. It's a place of amazing gifts that will bless your life and the lives of those around you and beyond just your circle of obvious influence. And another way I've described it is that a lot of people who have been through great challenges, who have explored many of the corridors of the underworld, it's also as if you keep being dropped into the center of a dark forest. And as you continue to be dropped there and find your way out or your way back home, if you will, you learn all those paths from any place of forgetting or suffering to that place of home. And part of what I'm saying in this video is that the place of suffering and the place of home are not opposites. Yes, definitely, we don't want to hang out in suffering on purpose for long periods of time just because. We want to be probably at home, maybe in that warm place in the forest where you can curl up on the moss and dream your nymph dreams, right? And that's a beautiful wish, absolutely. In the midst of my quote-unquote suffering, I am able to also curl up on the moss and have my nymph dreams. I am still able to access phenomenal information, move energies through my body in ways that are, again, most people would consider miraculous, and experience the orgasmic field of energy in ways that nourish and heal me on a daily basis. So, as long as we polarize suffering and that feeling of home or healing as these truly separate events where one is bad and the other is always good, and we want to get away from the bad as quickly as we can, there is that polarization. And the deeper you go on this journey, the more that polarization fades away. And when that polarization fades away, it's not just like you got home and you close the door and you're like, okay, I'm home now, I'm just going to stay here. There's no more guarding. And yet even that is not more evolved in some kind of better way, if that makes sense. And if not, perhaps it will as I keep speaking, or perhaps it does at a deep level that doesn't make sense rationally or linearly. So Isis, there was a time when Osiris died, one of the times that he died, that she suffered and grieved so mightily that she took on the appearance as if she had aged like 100 years and looked very unwell, and her teeth were falling out and her hair was falling out, and she was just hunched over, and she would just wail by the Nile and just, pull out some of her hair. And it says that actually she smelled bad and no one wanted to be around her, even though she had been the queen who was adored like none other. And sad but true, I've encountered so many friends in the Lyme community or chronic illness community who have similarly been sort of left by many people who love them at their hour of greatest need. But so Isis, she went into it all the way, even though she was a fully divine, self-realized being. She came in with full self-realization, what we would call enlightenment, and still went through this painful journey. But it was in going into that deep, dark place. The deep, dark soil of the Nile is actually where the word alchemy comes from. So as she was deep in this mud and this dirt of the Nile, that's how she found the alchemy within her that was more powerful than anything she'd known before, and was able to bring Osiris back to life and experience what we consider immaculate conception as well as part of that, and give birth to Horus. So these are the kinds of miracles, bringing someone back from death and immaculate conception, that people consider very high miracles, right? But no one thinks about, most often, how she suffered and went through the depths of her experience to cull that richness. So another story that I love so much is the story of Inanna. the goddess Inanna, she was already queen of heaven and earth. That's a pretty good deal, right? I mean, she had it going on. She had everything a queen could want. And all the bliss and all the euphoria, everything. She decided, the story of Persephone is also very powerful, especially the way I tell it from my communication with Persephone about it, which is a more empowered twist on the story. But Inanna went there on purpose. She didn't fall into a crack or get brought down there or anything like that. She said, I'm going to give up my life and my crowns as queen of heaven and earth and go into the underworld. So the short version of the story is she goes into the underworld, and at each of these 7 gates, a gatekeeper tells her to remove an article of clothing or a piece of her jewelry, and finally her crown, until she is completely naked. And each time the gatekeeper says to her to remove it, and she says, well, why? And the gatekeeper says, the ways of the underworld are perfect. And that's what this video is about. The ways of the underworld are perfect, even if they don't seem that way. And they're not a sign that you are less evolved or doing something wrong, unless there's a message coming to you that there's something to be adjusted inside of you that's different. But this pervasive sense that we're doing it wrong, we're less than, we're not enough, is the biggest barrier that I have discovered on the face of the planet at this time to actual shift toward embodiment of love. We're not sure we're deserving of embodying love because we think we're less than, because we still have experiences that don't seem enlightened, quote unquote. So as Inanna went through these 7 gates and she finally was naked as she went into the underworld, she then faced a series of judges. And what my experience of communicating with Inanna about this story is that these judges were not actual external beings. They were self-judges, any way that she had ever judged herself. And she had to face those ways that she may have judged herself. And then she faced her sister, Ereshkigal, who actually represents her shadow. Any unowned material, any flinches or doubts about her true essence. And yes, you can, I know it doesn't seem possible, right? But you can be enlightened and still have those experiences as a human. I have a quote of my own that I love to say, which is, I'm not interested in being enlightened. I've been there before. I can be there anytime, like now. And then I say, I'm interested in becoming better at being human. And so was Inanna. So was Isis. And that was the magic for them while embodied on this earth in terms of giving a gift that shifted the planet through giving a gift to themselves. So Inanna faces Ereshkigal, which is her shadow, and Ereshkigal kills her, and she gets her body gets put on a hook. Her corpse gets put on a hook. Now, I don't know if any of you can relate to some of the deepest, most challenging depths of pain or of any kind in your life, but being a corpse on a hook might just come close to explaining what that can feel like. But it was through that surrender process and trust in something beyond even life and death and all of the rest that she was able to then bring herself back to life and bring herself back to the earth, the only person, according to the story, who had ever lived beyond the underworld, and then be queen of heaven, earth, and the underworld. So when people talk to me about healing, I think of this. Like, I wouldn't want to rush the process of becoming naked, facing any judges, any shadow, any question from my whole soul journey, which is what a lot of us are doing in this lifetime, in this time on earth, because it's such a powerful time. We're finishing a lot of stuff, and yet it's not a finished process where you suddenly are done and there's no crack and everything is just, it is both that and not that at all times. It is a flower that sometimes grows in different ways than we expect it to or think looks perfect and pretty, but it's all perfect and pretty. And the sooner we know that, the sooner there isn't this destination, there isn't this moment under the Bodhi tree. It's every moment. So I have, so much more to say about this. It is dear to my heart. And as I said, something I've been teaching and talking about for years, and going through this deepening of it has only made me able to share it from a richer place. I've been able to talk about these things, even the challenging parts of it all, since I was small. I started giving readings when I was a little girl, talking about existence and the nature of all that is and love. And it's interesting to come from my perspective. And I hope that I've been able to share some of that with you today, and that using that exploration as you reflect on your own life, past, present, future, knowing that ultimately what comes from all of this is so much beauty and love. Even though it doesn't seem that way, even though sometimes we have to go into the place that feels like lack of trust in order to heal that place. It might even just be a tiny fracture, but when you get inside it, it feels all-encompassing. But it's the greater trust around it that you have that's allowing you to go into that fracture of trust. It's all holy. It's so sacred. So, as I was saying, I hope that this has been a beautiful blessing in your path, and I will share more on these subjects, much more, over the years and in future videos. And my courses are wonderful. If you like this video, you will love them. And if you like this video, sign up for my email list on my website. I will keep sharing fantastic information with you every month, and it would be my joy to connect with you. And just know that self-love, sexuality, and intuition have been paramount on my journey. And that's why I teach what I do. So I love you all from the bottom of my heart, from deep in the underworld, from right here in this beautiful earth, and from wonderfully from the heavens as well. All three sacred to my heart. And you are too. Love to you all.